If you think you want to get on the property ladder, this video might change your mind or at least delay it. Hello, my name is Ellis. I'm a qualified accountant and I make videos about everything personal finance, business, life, mental health, or anything else that you guys ask for. In this video, I just wanted to share my experience as a homeowner with a mortgage, from preparing to buy to the actual process to being an owner now for more than a year and a half. I just want to preface this video that I consider myself extremely lucky to be able to have purchased a property by the time I was 25. This is no way a video about bragging or anything like that. I just wanted to share my experience, especially as a foreigner. I was not born in the UK. I moved here almost a decade ago. So if you are interested in my experience, just keep on watching. The first thing I wanted to mention about my experience is obviously the whole purchase or the purchasing period of the property. Now that can last months, weeks, months, sometimes even years, depending on if you have a chain. Normally the minimum that solicitors would advise is probably 12 weeks, which is about 4 months. If you get it done faster than that, then you are extremely lucky, but more often than not, it will take a really long time. The process is also full of proofreading documents. So most of your mornings and evenings after work, if you're working a regular 9 to 5, would be filled with reading a lot of documents. Especially if you are doing this by yourself, I think it can be quite overwhelming, as some of the documents are written in a very legal jargon. So especially for me, there was a lot of Googling involved of what means what, and trying to consult with other, friends and colleagues that have purchased a property, if they had come across this term, this law, and things like that, just trying to exchange knowledge. But I just wanted to say that as a single person, it kind of weighed on me doing it, because you feel responsible that if anything went wrong, it's your fault. So you try to do your best to research and to read and to make sure that you understand everything correctly, because at the end of the day, you are taking the responsibility of paying a mortgage of hundreds and hundreds of thousands for the next possibly 30 years of your life, and especially when it's coming to a leasehold transactions, they do hide, not hide, but they are a bit more tricky when it comes to the legal side of things. So I definitely can confirm that it feels quite overwhelming, especially if you're doing this when you're single. I'm not sure if you are doing this with a partner, whether that would sort of make it easier and you can share the load of the things and divide and conquer in a way, or would it actually make you more stressed because you are doing it with someone else and it's just so responsible. But yeah, I have had confirmation from other colleagues and friends that have went through the process by themselves, and they were equally as extremely overwhelmed. And the same comment that I kept on hearing was, oh my god, I'm living here for the next 10 years because I just don't want to go through this again. And it is true. You would probably reach that point in time, right before everything completes, because there are just so many moving parts, communicating with the banks, solicitors. You don't really directly communicate with the seller, but chasing, pushing, checking, double checking. So yeah, I think like the purchasing process in the UK can be quite overwhelming, quite complicated, strenuous, and quite costly, in fact. The second point that I wanted to mention in this video is all the extra costs that come up with buying a property. Obviously, the biggest one is having a deposit. Normally that would be 10-20% deposit of the property. Now there are different types of mortgage products who allow maybe 5%, lower, higher, etc. Just depends on your financial situation and obviously the lender that you would like to go through. But something else that also comes up is stamp duty. Stamp duty, land tax, is a tax that is paid on a purchase of a property in the UK, whether that's residential or not, the tax is applied. There is a threshold. I think currently in the UK is 425,000. So if you buy a property that is cheaper than that, you are not required to pay stamp duty. However, if you do pay higher, if you purchase a property that is more expensive, then you are required. And just as a comparison, stamp duty can be a cost that adds up quite a lot to a purchase. So let's say, for example, if you decided to buy a property for 700,000, your stamp duty then would be 22,500. So that's on top of the deposit that you would need to put down when purchasing that property. So that is something to consider from very early on when you start looking for a property, just because it can be quite a big chunk of an expense. Another fee that can come up is mortgage advisor fee. Now, some mortgage brokers, they don't take a fee. Some do, some take commission from the product that you choose. I personally had to pay, I think, £200 fee for my mortgage broker, but she was absolutely amazing. I think it's definitely more worth it to invest in an amazing mortgage broker who has quite a lot of experience and can deal with complicated cases, in order to be able to find you the best deal, which obviously you would be paying with your hard-earned money. So I think it's definitely something worth investing in. Another fee that might come up is a valuation fee. That is something non-negotiable, I don't think, when it comes to lenders. Unfortunately, the buyer has to cover that cost, and it's around £300, I believe, per property. Not sure if it's more expensive for houses and cheaper for apartments, not entirely sure, but I think approximately I had to pay £300 for a property valuation before taking out the mortgage. Then there is also a mortgage fee, which is a product fee that I sort of didn't pay attention to a lot, because sometimes you can include it in the repayment of the mortgage. I wouldn't really recommend that, because, for example, if the mortgage product fee is £1,000 and then you decide to amortize it over 30 years, then it doesn't make sense. So just my advice would be to pay it upfront, and call it a day. Definitely do pay attention to those. Some are more expensive, some are cheaper. I think it's more dependent on obviously the lender, the length of how long you are fixing your mortgage for, what rate it is, etc., etc. Then another sort of cost that might come up is all the small fees that go into the solicitor fee. So the solicitor fees are something that you would be required to pay. Obviously, you need lawyers to complete a legal transaction. So, that would vary depending on the transaction and the complexity of the transaction that you have. Normally, it's more expensive when you have a leasehold property. If it's a freehold, maybe you can get away with a bit less. But all the small charges that they need to do on your behalf, like local searches, what was anything else? Local searches, admin, just little fees that pop up and definitely do inflate the price of it quite a lot, actually. Keep that in mind. If you get quoted, for example, that your solicitor's fees will be 1,500, I would say definitely budget around 2.5, just to be on the safe side. What I think would probably come up as 2,000, but definitely don't take it as face value, because there are always things that come up, and they charge you for the littlest things, from like posting, printing, things like that. So definitely budget a little bit extra for that, for sure. Now, the third topic that I wanted to bring up when purchasing a property is actually considering the cost involved in running the actual property. So that would be things like service charge and ground rent. That is normally what you get when you have a leasehold property or when you live in a very new development, even if it's a freehold house. Things like council tax band, electricity band, heating source. So all of those things will impact how much does it cost you to run this property on a monthly basis. For example, For leasehold properties such as apartments, it's very common to have service charge and ground rent. I think the ground rent got abolished and should be peppercorn ground rent, which should be 0, but there are still, you know, properties being sold with a ground rent of like maybe 150 a year, 250 a year, 100 a year. So that's something that you need to consider as an extra cost. And of course, the bigger cost is the service charge. So that is a charge that would be charged to every single apartment in order to maintain the communal areas of the block of apartment, for example, or the development. Normally that would be between 1,000 to 2,000 pounds, depending on your location, the size of the development, how old it is, how new it is, etc., etc. But that's something also that you need to account and cost for, because let's say the service charge is like 1,500 a year, and then you have another 150 ground rent, that 1,600 pounds that you need to budget in every month or save every year in order to be able to cover that cost. Also, council tax bans. So in some councils it will be more expensive than in others. Again, this depends on the area that you live in and the size of the property you have. Again, that would be a minimum cost of like 150 a month, you know, for a small property. If you go for a higher property, that's even more expensive. So definitely before buying a property, do a quick Google search and figure out which council you are under, which band is the property, how much does it cost, do you have any discounts for living as a single person, as a family, etc., etc. So consider that, because I think even for 2-bedroom apartments in the area that I used to live in was maybe around 250 pounds, which is definitely not a small amount of money to be spending on a monthly basis on top of a mortgage and everything else. Another thing that I got burned from, and this was during renting, was, so what's the property built from? Is it a brick? Is it something else? What is the heating source? So is it heated via electric heaters, or is it gas heating? And what is the EPC rating of the property? Those few things will genuinely determine the amount of bills that you paid on a monthly basis. So I used to live in a studio apartment, which was in a building that was converted from an office, and the heating source was electric heaters. My monthly bill was 400 pounds just for electric for a tiny studio. When I bought my apartment, or when I was trying to buy an apartment, I made it a big point in my search that it needed to have a good EPC rating, such as B or minimum C. And it was built from, majority of the build should have been brick, and the heating, I preferred it to be gas. I went from paying 400 pounds a month for a tiny studio to paying like 85 pounds for gas and electric in a very spacious 1-bedroom flat. And bear in mind, I'm a person that is cold all the time, so I definitely didn't cheap out on putting the heating on in the winter and etc. So that definitely makes a big difference when it comes to obviously your monthly expenses relating to a property and things like that. Now, the last point that I wanted to bring in this video is actually quite controversial, and this is the lack of freedom and stress that I felt as a property owner. Now, obviously, we are all buying or wanting to buy a property of our own to be able to feel more free, do whatever you want, whenever you want, decorate however you want it, know that it's yours, that you can get kicked out, you know, just your piece, and that it's your own accomplishment and your own asset, and etc., etc. However, no one is talking about the fact that you get bogged down with a hundreds and hundreds of thousands of pounds mortgage, and in the beginning it does feel quite overwhelming. You literally think to yourself, what did I actually just do, and what did I get myself into? Okay, because this is a legal contract. You can't just get up and leave. You can't just get up and transfer it to someone else. You can just get up and sell a property. Like, it takes time, it takes an investment, you have to pay someone to sell it as well. So it is definitely something that you get into that you cannot get out of as easily. That's one thing. And second of all, we all buy a property with the intention that maybe we will be there for a long time, obviously to benefit from the property itself, the price appreciation, building up equity, obviously not wasting your money on rent and things like that. However, sometimes we don't think that life can happen and our situations can change, and the same thing happened to me. So I bought my property when I was single. I was planning to be there for a very long time. I was planning to use this property as a stepping stone to upgrade in the future, to use it as an investment, build equity, have a peace of mind, etc., etc. However, year and a half down the line, I am married. I live with my partner now. I don't live at the property anymore, which has forced me to rent it out. This is where sometimes the problem comes. So I purchased my property when the interest rates were rising a lot, and I decided to fix my mortgage for 5 years because this was the maximum that I could afford to pay as a single person, and I was happy with that. Okay, I accepted it. I was like, fine, this is mine, I can afford this, we're all good as long as it doesn't go above that on my salary. And then obviously my situation changed and I had to move and I had to rent it out because it's fixed for 5 years. If I was to sell it, I have to pay a very, very hefty penalty of like £8,000 if I was to repay the mortgage early, which is what normally happens if you sell your property, right? So forced to rent it out, which is completely fine, but the rent that I am getting does not actually cover all the costs related with the property. So, you have your mortgage, you have service charge, you have ground rent, and anything else as a repair that might come up, you are responsible for it as the owner. So I am stuck in a position where if I sell it, I have to pay a hefty penalty, which obviously will eat up in my profit if there will be any, or if I have to keep renting it out at a loss every single month. And I'm hoping that that will change in the future, and maybe it will raise in value so much that I would be able to make up some of those losses that are going on at the moment. But this is just a good point to show from my experience that if you are buying a property, please consider that if something else happened in your life, if your situation changed, if you no longer could live in it, if you no longer could live in it and you can't sell it because you're also stuck in a fixed deal mortgage, please run the numbers if your costs will be covered, say if you were to rent it out, for example, because I didn't, because I was planning to be there for a very long time and now I'm not. So, I should have probably calculated this a bit better. Definitely use this as a lesson from my experience and try to implement it in your purchasing of property consideration. I hope this video was helpful. Let me know if you have any more questions about buying a property in the UK. I'm happy to help.